Baroque art. Sorry we didn't get to this in class last week and then today, but if you have any questions about Baroque art, please ask me. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about Baroque art. So first of all, Baroque, the name, is a Portuguese name or a Portuguese word that means a misshapen pearl. And so it was meant to be an insult. If something was called Baroque, it was meant to be really insulting to that art or music. Baroque art lasts from about 1600 to 1725 are sort of the dates. And it includes art, it includes music. On the AP test, they don't ever include music, so I'm sorry for those of you who love Baroque music. I did today in class play a little bit of Baroque music with Vivaldi's Four Seasons, the winter season, and I would certainly encourage you to listen to it, but they have never, at least that I've seen, they've never asked a question about Baroque music. So we're going to look at Baroque art, the visual art. And this is, if you recall back to chapter... what was it? I think it was chapter 11. Yes, chapter 11 about the Reformation. You may recall that I brought up Baroque art as one of the three kind of approaches to the Catholic Counter-Reformation or of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. The first was Ignatius Loyola and the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits that went out and sought to reconvert people and build schools and to counter the Protestant Reformation. The second one was the Council of Trent. That was where they decided to maintain doctrine but get rid of and change some of the abuses in the church. The third was Baroque art, that they use art as a way of trying to inspire people. So Baroque artists sought to bring together both classical ideals of Renaissance art, so they want it to be realistic, they want it to be natural, they want it to be interesting, and they don't, they certainly don't want to go back to the art of the Middle Ages, but they really want to invoke a lot of feeling of spirituality. They want to appeal to the senses, excite religious feeling, portray miracles and drama, but make it look realistic. They don't want it to look like a cartoon or something that is laughable. They want to shock and awe. They want to impress people. Again, this is one of the three prongs of the Counter-Reformation. So they want people to be so awestruck, so inspired by the art that they see that they can't help believe that the church is true. Baroque art was used both by the Catholic Church and also political leaders to show off their power, to show off prestige. Art is a way of showing that you are someone that's important, that you have money. And so both the church and political leaders throughout Europe would use this art to show that off. So let's look at some of it. Gian Lorenzo Bernini was a Baroque artist, an Italian Baroque artist, and he does a lot of work for the Catholic Church. One of the most famous things that he does is the piazza in front of St. Peter's Basilica. So St. Peter's Basilica is the center of the Catholic Church. It is the main cathedral. That's a more common name that you guys might be familiar with. But so the Basilica is this cathedral, and you're actually standing at towards the top of the cathedral in this picture, and you're looking out over what is now Vatican City, and outward you can see Rome out in the far reaches of this picture. But where you see kind of these two sets of columns coming together, that is what Bernini built, and it creates this piazza, and the way it's described is that this is the motherly arms of the church welcoming you into the heart of the church. So St. Peter's Basilica is the heart of the church. This is where the Pope lives. This is the center of the Catholic Church. This is embracing people. It's bringing them into the heart of the church. Another example of Bernini's work is the throne of St. Peter. So you can see this is like outlandish. You've got what looks like sunlight and gilded, meaning golden, these golden inlay, and it looks like sunbeams shining out over it. Now the actual chair here that's considered to be St. Peter's chair is like this old wood chair that's filled with wormholes, and it's like kind of decrepit and falling apart. But what Bernini did was make it magnificent. Make it, again, this like awe-inspiring, miraculous, it looks like the sun is just shining, that God is watching over this chair, looking over this chair. And so it's sort of this larger than life and very dramatic. Another famous Baroque artist is Caravaggio. This famous piece is the Calling of St. Matthew. Now, something Caravaggio is well known for is chiaroscuro. And this is the intense use of light and dark to get the viewer to look where the artist wants them to look. Our eyes naturally are drawn to lighter colors. So as we're looking at this, probably most of us are noticing the faces. The light is coming out of what we assume is a window. The sun is shining in, and you're seeing these faces. What maybe you didn't notice is that Jesus Christ is in the picture. But Jesus Christ isn't the most noticeable figure because Jesus Christ is kind of surrounded by shadow. And that's not where our eye turns. So once you've kind of looked at the figures whose faces are brighter because of the light, once you've looked at that, then you start to notice the rest of the scene. And this is Jesus Christ pointing at Matthew, St. Matthew, and calling him as one of the apostles. So I think it's a really effective and interesting use of light and dark to get the viewer, you in this case, to look where the artist wants you to look. For Velázquez, this is an interesting piece. It's the Surrender of Breda. So Velázquez is a Spanish artist. I didn't mention Caravaggio and Bernini are both Italian artists. Velázquez is a Spanish artist, and he works for the King of Spain at the time. And this particular piece is, it's sort of a propaganda piece for the King of Spain. Breda was one of the few victories the Spanish had over the Dutch during the 80 Years' War. And the King of Spain wanted to show off how magnanimous, how generous, how considerate the Spanish are, even in victory. That they're not mocking the Dutch or berating them for being losers. That here you see the Dutch are on the left-hand side, the Spanish are on the right-hand side, that they're treating them with dignity and respect. And this was meant to be propaganda because it was meant to show, look, the Spanish, we're not the bad guys, we're the nice guys here. Las Meninas, this is one of the most famous pieces of Baroque art. Here, again, you've got the focal point is the lightest figure, so the little girl that's in the middle that's looking at you. And she is the daughter of the King and Queen of Spain. So you kind of think, oh, this is just a portrait of her and her friends and, the people that are around her. You can see these girls that are surrounding her that are probably, friends of hers and watch over her. It was very common for people with dwarfism to be hired as servants for children. The idea was that because they were small, they would play with the children in addition to being the adult that could watch over them. Then as you look back, you see, this nun and guy talking, and you see kind of this creeper guy that's in the stairwell. Then you might notice, you've got some paintings. Actually, Velázquez recreates some paintings, some other famous artists in this scene. Then you might notice this guy. And he's looking at something. And what he's looking at, you can see here, is the back of a canvas. Because actually what's happening in this scene is, this is Velázquez. This is a self-portrait. He is painting a portrait of the royal couple, the king and queen. You can see that in the mirror in the background. That you've got the king and the queen, their mirrored image, they're standing, having their portrait taken or painted by Velázquez, but then the painting that you see that's presented to you is of their daughter and her consorts. So it's like a painting within a painting with paintings in it. It's a pretty incredible piece and one of the most famous pieces of Spanish Baroque art. Another example is Peter Paul Rubens. He's a Flemish artist, so it's in modern-day Belgium. He does an allegory of the outbreak of war. This is his social commentary on the 30 Years' War. It's an allegory because he doesn't directly show the atrocities of war, but he's making a comment on them through using these mythological images. On the far left-hand side, you have a woman who's kind of waving her arms. She represents Europe. In front of her, you have this woman who's nude, who looks like a Greek goddess because she is. She's Venus or Aphrodite, and she is trying to stop Mars or Ares, who's in this like state of fury and just kind of being monstrous, and he's, you can see that he's just trudging over these women and men who are trying to flee and who have fallen at the wayside. And so he represents this war that's raging on, aka the 30 Years' War, while Venus is trying to stop him, and Europe's just kind of helplessly trying to hold on in the background. So it's an allegory because it's not an actual representation of what was going on at the time, but through his painting, he is commenting on what is happening in Europe during the 30 Years' War. He also does a lot of altar pieces. This one's the Elevation of the Cross, and I think I've shown you this one before, I think in another PowerPoint, but here you have this sort of mangled flesh and these really, Jesus, you look at his body, normally he looks kind of emaciated in depictions of him being put up on the cross, but here he's got this very muscular form, and the guy that's, in the front, the bald guy who's lifting up, not helping him up, that's the wrong choice of words, who is lifting him up is just very muscly, and it creates this, very intriguing and kind of a dramatic version of Jesus Christ's elevation. And this particular altar piece, so this is about 14 feet tall, this depiction, and it's in the Cathedral of Amsterdam that you can go see it. So again, it's another great example of kind of shock and awe, and create this really incredible visual image that people are inspired by. And the last artist that I want to mention is another Italian artist, a female artist. Again, for the most part, women were barred from being a part of the artistic community, but Artemisia Gentileschi, her father was an artist, and she learned from him, and she does a lot of subjects, religious subjects, but particularly of women. So this is the subject of Judith, who is a biblical character, who ends up killing a man named Holofernes. He was a general that had come in and taken over the area where the Israelites lived, and so she kind of tries to seduce him, and he gets drunk, and while he's asleep, she ends up cutting off his head. And so it's a pretty gruesome depiction of that. But again, it's the drama, it's the intrigue, it's the sort of shock and awe that enhances. And again, she very much like Caravaggio, she uses the kind of light to direct your eye towards the action that's going on. So chiaroscuro, you have the very dark background, and then the light figures, you really notice them. Baroque art is kind of in France, it's characterized by Louis XIV and his palace at Versailles. This is a great example of using art as a way of glorifying a political leader. That Versailles, it's grandiose, it's in your face, it's opulent, it's just kind of this amazing, and it epitomized the idea of Baroque art in France. Baroque art in Protestant countries was quite a bit different. They didn't do religious images or any kind of pagan myths, classicism, historical subjects, ornate churches. Again, if you think about what we've learned about Protestantism, The focus is on Scripture. The focus is on the Bible. You don't need these images to ponder on or think about. And so their churches tended to be pretty simple, and there wasn't much of a need of a lot of religious imagery. So what does that leave us with? Well, landscapes and people. And you saw while I did my lecture today, I had in the background an example of a Baroque landscape. In the Netherlands, the Dutch, during the Dutch Golden Age, the Netherlands becomes the center of painting for Protestant Baroque art. Much like during the Dutch Golden Age, the Dutch were very successful in trade and shipbuilding. They're also going to be at the height of the artistic movement of the day. The middle class, and I know this sounds weird, but in the Netherlands, the middle class were called the burghers. In fact, I'd love if you highlight in yellow the term burgher. So these were merchants and bankers and doctors and lawyers and professors. They all wanted paintings on their walls. So you don't have paintings in churches, but people wanted paintings in their homes. And the paintings in their homes, they didn't want religious paintings. They wanted paintings that were portraits. They wanted paintings that reflected real life. They wanted landscape paintings that they looked at and were like, oh, that's pretty. And they wanted to use paintings to show off their wealth and status. Because obviously, I mean, it's kind of like cars today, that we use cars to kind of show off someone's status. If you're driving around in like a Jaguar or a Lamborghini, that kind of says something about you. If someone walks into your home and they see a painting by one of the famous artists at the time, that says something about the wealth and stature that you have. These burghers would oftentimes commission portraits of themselves and of their families to be able to show off their wealth. And they wanted realistic portraits. They didn't want necessarily these grandiose, larger-than-life images. They wanted usually simple everyday life images. So some examples of this, Vermeer, he is one of my favorites. He does what is known as frozen animation. So we're in the era where we're long ahead of cameras being invented. And so this is about the closest you're going to come to getting a capture of a person in a moment. Now, having said that, Vermeer had people as models. So somebody was modeling as a milkmaid and was dressed in this outfit, and somebody was dressed as the girl with the pearl earring. But when you look at the image, it doesn't look like a pose. It looks like he captured a moment in time. And again, this is called frozen animation. Judith Leister, similar idea. You've got, she's a female artist at the time, so again, she's kind of an exception to the rule. But she liked to do sort of like everyday people having fun, enjoying themselves. Like this couple here, just a happy couple. Again, this is more like frozen animation. They aren't looking like they're posing for a portrait to be done of them. They just look like they're just having a good time, drinking probably some wine, listening to music, playing music, and enjoying each other's company. This is a self-portrait of Leister. Again, it's kind of her in a very natural state. I mean, she is posing, we can tell that, but she's posing in this very natural pose. It doesn't look like, when you see portraits of monarchs and stuff, in that very, kind of stagnant pose that they always look a little bit stiff. She looks very relaxed and very natural. Rembrandt van Rijn is probably the most famous. Both he and Judith Leister and Jan Vermeer were all Dutch artists. And the Anatomy of Dr. Nicholas Tulp, what I love about this one is it reflects the changes that are going on right now. What did we just talk about in class? Medical advancements, dissection of human remains, that in Protestant countries like the Netherlands, where Rembrandt is from, that doctors and medical universities are now using dissection to understand the human body. that's reflected in the art of Rembrandt. That is reflected in this specific piece, the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tulp. So it confirms what I was telling you before. The Night Watch, I love this painting. Here you have what appears to be, two men that are kind of prominent merchants, it looks like. But the reality is Rembrandt was likely given a commission by a joint stock company, so a merchant company, to do a portrait of all its members. Now, normally when an artist is asked to do a portrait of a company of men, it's kind of like your standard family pictures, right? You have the short people in the front, the tall people in the back, some people are kneeling, some people are sitting, but everybody is supposed to have a space in the picture. Well, that's not what happened with Night Watch. That you have the two men that are sort of in the forefront, that are the most obvious. Then if you really look closely, you have some people who barely their faces made it in. This also indicates that there's animation off the canvas because you don't see everyone's full body. So that makes it more intriguing because you know something else is happening around you. You just don't know what it is. You can't see it because it's off the canvas. And then you have this kind of random little girl that sort of looks maybe like an angel, or maybe she's a pickpocket, and we don't know why she's there, and we don't really know why Rembrandt didn't do the traditional, representation of a merchant company. But if I'm speaking for myself, I'm sure glad he didn't, because this one's a lot more interesting. Rembrandt also did a lot of sketches, and this is where he did do some religious sketches. So this is the stoning of Saint Stephen. There are other religious images that he does. He doesn't really do religious paintings per se, but etchings. He has a whole series of some religious etchings. So Rembrandt is like the father of selfies. Now, I say that with a lot of respect because I take a lot of selfies. So, he is sort of the guy that puts selfies on the map. Throughout his life, he does at least 100 self-portraits, which makes him a fascinating case study because he's one of the few people that we can actually see throughout much of the entirety of his life. And so here are some of his many faces. So to finish up, as I'd like to say, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it. Thank you for listening.